Well, cybersecurity is a constantly moving battlefield. It's impossible to keep up if you're not always building your skills.
We always need to really understand what that landscape looks like in order to bring in talent.
So we often talk about a skills gap as in there are individuals who have no cybersecurity skills. I think of it as you may still be an expert in one area, but you have gaps in your knowledge that you need to fill. Like you can be an expert in web application pen testing and know nothing about how your cloud environment is set up and secured.
A lot of these college hire students that we bring in may not have hands-on experiences. AT&T is a really great company to mentor and foster growth in cybersecurity.
Hands-on training is key. Capture the Flag is a great way of imparting cyber skills to people. Cyber Rangers are great because they are as close to a real event in your environment as many people are willing to get. It starts to click a lot more, and then when they're solving the problems later in work, they don't have to go back and try and remember the things that they read from memory. They can do it almost from what you'd call like a cyber muscle memory.
I think it's really important at AT&T to really have this mentality of strong communication skills. It's so critical to be able to articulate clearly any information that you need to share with the team.
Understanding soft skills, how to talk to people, how to frame the situation that you're describing in a way that ultimately comes toward everyone working towards solving a problem as opposed to casting blame. It's very important in getting things done.
You as a person have to have that mindset to continuously read, learn, and also train in order to be able to adapt and be in this environment.
Please welcome Jennifer Morovitz, Hutch Hutchinson, Jamie Cummings, and Jenai Marinkovic.
Good afternoon, and I'd like to welcome our panel of experts today. Let's kick off the discussion on advancing today's cyber talent with the fact that we are facing a pretty big gap in cybersecurity talent at the moment. And I know Rich brought it up and several other people in the earlier talks raised this issue. A couple of stats. According to the World Economic Forum, there's a shortage of 3.4 million cybersecurity experts to support today's global economy. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has predicted cybersecurity positions will increase 35% by 2031. So, got a pretty big mountain to climb. With this talent shortage, what avenues can people take to begin or pivot into cybersecurity roles, and what skills are needed? Jenai, can we start with you?
Sure. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. So if one of the first things I think that we need to do is you need to understand the world of cybersecurity and the different opportunities and jobs. It's a broad field, and saying I'm going into cybersecurity isn't enough. So understanding the different roles, the different positions, I oftentimes will tell junior people to go into LinkedIn, find the area of security they like, find a job, somebody's post, and then follow their career and say whether or not that's a career journey you want to follow. So that's the first. The second is that you've got to join a group. Threat actors work in teams from the very beginning, and so do cybersecurity professionals. So whether or not you're joining ISC Squared, ISACA, any variety of different groups, it's really important that you start joining with other people. I'm been very fortunate to be part of an organization called GRACY, which is GRC for Intelligent Ecosystems. And we train people of color, women, people from socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, and veterans into cybersecurity and GRC from the very beginning of their career. And we'll talk about that fun stuff in a bit. But what we do is we make sure that we train people as teams from the very onset of their career. So that's the next. The next is projects for life. For the rest of your career, you have to be doing side hustles. You've got to be doing projects. You always have to keep your skills sharp. So find a group of people, find something fun, and do a project together and write about it. So that's another way that you can build your skills. And then finally, I'll end on this, and that's volunteering. You know, all of us had help getting here, and so you, even at the very beginning of your career, can help somebody else. And so it's a great way to network, but more importantly, it's a way for you to give back into this industry where you're trying to make a difference.
Great, thanks, Jenai. Jamie, what are your thoughts?
Well, just to set a little bit of context, I work on a little bit of the other end of the ecosystem when it comes to talent. So I recruit executives, typically the rich beige CISOs of the world and their direct reports. So I look at it through the lens of, what does it take to be an executive in this ecosystem of cybersecurity? I think it's not as important to me what the entry point is. I think ultimately there are so many different flavors of CISOs and roles and the routes that they've come up, and I think it's continuing to diversify. Really, a lot of my focus is I think there's a lot of fundamental basics in technology you need to have some credibility, be able to call BS, in that role. But there's a wide range of broader soft skills that you need to develop along the way in order to be effective as a technology or security leader. And I can touch on those a little bit later. Okay. But I think that ultimately, if you really want to get in information security, just find a way to get in, find good mentors, find ways to really broaden your exposure, because CISOs and their teams are being pulled in more and more directions, and that'll better position you for more senior roles throughout your career.
Great, thank you. Hutch, what do you think?
Maybe I'll jump in a little bit more at the entry point and more technically focused. It's sort of my observation that most successful cybersecurity operators possess two key characteristics. The first, intellectual curiosity, and then two, technical acumen. You may not necessarily have to have a graduate degree or even a bachelor's degree, but if you're a self-starter, if you're dedicated and you enjoy solving difficult, challenging technical problems, and you're not deterred if your initial attempts fail, then cybersecurity could be a fantastic, promising career field for you.
What about joining organizations such as CyberUp or Cyber Patriots, or there's those types of organizations that people can join just to get their foot in the door as well, correct?
Yeah, I'll just build on that. I think you mentioned Cyber Patriot. There's Girls Who Code, Women's Society of Cyber Jutsu. There's even US Cyber Games as examples.
What about paths through tangent disciplines such as IT or network? Jenai, I know you had some thoughts on that when we discussed it earlier.
Sure. Sure, it's helpful if you come into cybersecurity or GRC for that matter, because we should broaden it a little bit. Having a set of technical skills is helpful, but it's absolutely not necessary, and it's critical that we diversify our industry. We're operating with artificially intelligent systems every day that learn based on our presence. So making sure that we have a diversity of thought is important. And so one of the examples I love to give is that people who make amazing identity and access management people actually oftentimes come from HR. And its reason is that they look at the data differently. So I had, she's my partner. She was going through data from an identity and access management and audit, and she was able to identify cultural problems in the data. And she said, if you understand what you're looking at for, you can find culture in the data. And so she was able to identify problems that they were having within their business processes with human resources, also by looking at the information. So no, it's not absolutely necessary to have a technical background in order to get into cybersecurity. I would argue we need people who think differently from different industries.
Right. Jamie, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, one of my thoughts is that if I think about the CISO searches that we do, they can be very diverse in the people that I know in that ecosystem. On the one hand, two extreme differences. If you are the information security officer for a multi-billion-dollar, multi-business unit organization, you probably got business unit information security officers, and you really, in a lot of ways, you're a risk-oriented, policy-oriented person because you're not going to be in the nitty-gritty details of that. So what skills you need to have to be successful there? Relationship building, diplomacy, communications and presence, strong business acumen, the ability to influence. Whereas if you're the information security officer for a much smaller technology company or security products company, well, you better be really strong technically. You better be able to go toe-to-toe with the product security teams who probably think they're smarter about security than you do. And so at the end of the day, no two security roles are really created equally. And it depends on what your background is and where your interests lie. But I think the net of it is there are so many different opportunities depending upon where your interests and your strengths are. You can gravitate towards the right sort of roles depending upon where your interests really are strongest.
Great. With this humongous gap that we have to fill, Does leadership need to change how they think about staffing open positions, perhaps lowering the barrier to entry? I know I hear a lot, well, I have the cybersecurity degree, but I can't get interview for a job, but I can't get into the job. And then I hear the opposite, where I have a ton of talent, but I have a lot of experience, but I don't have a degree. So it feels like maybe we should be considering lowering the barrier a little bit, but I'd love your thoughts.
You want to start with me?
Yep.
Yeah, well, for me, I think the example I would use is that some of the more successful CISOs I've seen, first of all, with organizations that have the resources and support to do this, but they have been very forward-leaning in trying to attract talent from adjacent or other functions. People have a certain intangibles. They say, hey, if you're interested in information security, this is pretty fun. You can learn a lot of different things if they've got tenacity, comfort with ambiguity, mission orientation, and the willingness to jump in and learn something. They've been able to pull people, quite frankly, regardless of their degree. Maybe it's someone who's been in IT audit, right? Or maybe it's someone who started in finance and then did an ERP systems implementation, and they love technology. And next thing you know, they say, wow, security is really interesting. Bit of a learning curve there, but they've developed some of those other skill sets. So I think the net of it is be creative and thoughtful about trying to pull talent from non-obvious talent pools to really expand and develop a broader, capable team.
Right, that's a great takeaway. Okay, so Jamie, there's a lot of focus on cybersecurity technical skills. However, soft skills, many of them that you just mentioned, are important too. So what do you think the top 2 or 3 soft skills that folks should be considering to be successful in cybersecurity? What would those be?
The first one that comes is communications, and presence flows from that. Being able to communicate technical terms to non-technical people in terms that mean something to them is one. The second, and I'm going to leave some for the rest of the panel, would be relationship building with a wide range of stakeholders. It's going to be really critical as you get to the point where you need to influence others about why they need to do something.
Okay, great. Janai or Hutch, you want to chime in?
I'll take it. Actually, I'm just going to underscore what Jamie said about communication and how important it is. Successful CISOs avoid technical details and acronyms. Instead, speak in terms of risk management, risk mitigation, investment outcomes, so that their peers can make better, more informed business decisions.
So I want to make sure, is the question what makes a successful CISO or what makes a successful junior person going into cybersecurity?
Well, it was the junior first, but then moving into the CISO next. So I think we got a little bit about the CISO view, but yeah, just a general for anybody. And I think some of the comments are applicable to a junior member too.
It is. I would say you have to be a creative, out-of-the-box thinker. When you start looking at the digital ecosystems and the fact that we've got these intersections between digital, biological, physical systems all coming together, it means that the type of attacks that we're going to be seeing are going to be like ones that, as an example, happen in biological systems. So you've got to have people who understand how to think outside of the box and not necessarily come into a situation and approach it the way that everybody has for the past 40 years. So the people that I've found that have been pretty successful have that ability to kind of step back and look at things through a different perspective. So yeah.
Okay. Now this is for all of you. And if you had to pick one attribute or skill for a cybersecurity executive, what would that one skill be to be successful?
So for me, I think it would be, I'm going to put a term together. It's kind of strategic empathy. It's this ability to look at the big picture and understand what's going on, and then be able to connect with the human beings that are part of that, and then be able to identify the appropriate strategy from there. And I want to delineate that a CISO, while operational, is very much a strategist. So for me, it's this empathetic strategist.
I'll just build on the communication part of it, being an active listener. You're managing people at the end of the day, not things. So being able to understand the climate, the temperature, if you will, of your team is critically important.
I would say the ability to influence, but that's a byproduct of 3 other things: good business acumen, relationship building, and communications. So influencing doesn't happen in a vacuum. Those are the things that are key to that. But I think ultimately you're trying to convince people why they should or should not do something. And if you're not able to do that, you're not as likely to be successful.
What about executive presence? I hear that a lot. And I hear that, I think the term's pretty subjective, but it's thrown about.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'd love your thoughts on that.
yeah, it is fairly subjective. I think the way I would look at it would be, imagine someone that you could think of who has an executive presence, whether it's, I don't know, Troy Aikman. I've never met him, but I bet he's got it, right? But how does he have it? The way they carry themselves, the way they communicate. They have a certain calmness about them. I think command of the material certainly helps. But at the end of the day, I think also the ability to listen, to read the room, and really tailor your message to the audience so that you are addressing what the questions and concern are instead of being on transmit only. To me, those are the sort of things that really exude presence. And then there's also the physically, how do you dress and how do you look and how do you carry yourself, that goes a long way. I mean, those are my views of what people who have really good presence, what they exhibit.
Great. Anything to add?
Sure, I'm going to lean right back into empathy. So if you looked at the ISACA workforce study report that came out this past year as well as last year, one of the two bottom skills, the two bottom human skills were trustworthiness and empathy. These are the two least important skills when it comes to cybersecurity people when it comes to human communications, which is troubling. Right? Because for me, communication is founded in empathy. My ability to connect to you and to understand what's going on and so forth is key. So people who have amazing stage presence and executive presence are empathetic people by nature. And I think sometimes we might confuse what empathy means. There's many different kinds of empathy, but the ability to connect with a human being, be able to storytell and communicate my message is to me one of the most critical skills that we need to see in the industry, but we don't believe it.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to pivot more to training methodology. And so the cybersecurity community is turning to innovative methods to train new recruits and ensure that cybersecurity skills stay current. Hutch, can you explain how sim space and cyber simulations can assist?
Sure. Before I respond directly, let me sort of enumerate some basic tenets, maxims, lessons learned on how the military approaches training. The first thing is train as you fight. The second is it's better to fail in training than in combat. And then third, one of the lessons learned that we learned out of Vietnam was that for those fighter pilots that survived their first 10 combat missions, their chances of survival dramatically increased. So the Air Force created an exercise called Red Flag to duplicate those first 10 combat missions. In 2011, when I was at Cyber Command, I led the first Cyber Flag exercise, which of course is the cyber version of Red Flag. This is where we bring together hundreds of operators over a couple of weeks doing offensive, defensive actions. We would model adversarial networks, friendly networks, neutral networks. We'd exercise very advanced, sophisticated scenarios. And the idea was to provide insights to commanders on how we would fare in a future cyber conflict. At SimSpace, we attempt to take that cyber flag concept and apply it to the private sector.
Great. So does this type of training help with high stress scenarios? That when you're working a Log4j or whatever the latest and greatest. I was thinking about this when Cindy had her panel this morning. It is very stressful, right? So how do simulations play into that?
Well, by definition, it is very stressful. We will take, for example, it's a 24-hour exercise, global follow the sun model in some cases. We'll compress 3 years of attacks in that 24-hour period. It's very challenging, but it's also very fun. It's great for retention. It's a great crucible to learn leadership skills. And most importantly, it builds confidence in your team to be able to answer the question, can you effectively respond to a severe cyber attack?
And of course, it's always being updated with the latest and greatest threats, right? Jenai, can you explain how the work you're doing in virtual reality is being used to train and new folks as well as people who are in the industry?
Absolutely, absolutely. Crisis breeds creativity. What had ended up happening was we had our first cohort, and it's a 7-month academy that we put our people through, the students. And after spending an inordinate amount of time teaching risk, at the end of the cohort, everybody went for interviews, and people had struggles trying to describe risk. And so this was disturbing to me, given how much time we had spent teaching risk, and what we ended up finding out was that there was a knowledge retention issue. So, we're a remote, training facility, and went through all of the different things that were going on in terms of the learning experience, and really what it came down to is that I couldn't control the environment, the learning environment. So we started looking at options, and I decided, you know what, we're going to go VR. And so we designed the entire academy, so it's a 7-month program that's delivered in virtual reality. Everybody gets headsets 4 days a week. They're in VR. And what we found was that knowledge retention significantly increased. It took 3 months to get people onto client work before. When we put people in VR, 3 weeks is how long it took before we could get people doing work on client work. So it increased it. And what ended up happening is I control your environment. I'm not competing with your dog. I'm not competing with all of the other things that are going on in your life, right? I control that world. The other is that because I control that world, I can make sure that the environment itself maps to the content that I'm teaching. So if I'm teaching human-based communications, I can do that in an avatar world. But if I wanted to teach, say for instance, people getting ready to go into security operations centers, I might decide to build the training facility on the moon, and have a SOC that's on the moon. And what that does is it makes it easier for people to retain the content. But with VR, you have other things, right? You have haptic feedback that also increases the knowledge retention. And so at the end of the day, what we were able to do is we were able to significantly increase retention. It was a lot of fun, in VR, and it's a way that we're able to bring emergent technology into the picture at the very onset of somebody's career.
You have a new cloud class coming up, right, in VR?
I do. We're super excited and scared. So we'll be launching our first cloud security. It's an entry-level program, and again, the entire program will be designed in virtual reality. Even the labs themselves, we're using what's called an infinite office concept, where I can spin up multiple monitors, and people are able to work together on teams on their labs. So yeah, we'll be doing some pretty fun stuff in VR for the cloud security class.
Pretty cool. With the explosion of large language models and ChatGPT, this will open the door for new adversarial types of attacks. So what types of emerging technology or new methods can we expect to help train cybersecurity professionals to prepare for these types of new attacks?
Sure. I'll just jump in just for a hot second. Obviously, large language models are all the rage. It's critical. We actually teach prompt engineering to the students. And the reason is that if you look at it as, say, for instance, an artificially intelligent digital assistant that's more like a learning assistant, you can actually train the students to use, say, for instance, ChatGPT as an example, alongside their learnings. And so that's the way it's going to happen when they go into the corporate environments as well, and we're always trying to mimic that. And so what we've been able to find is that, again, knowledge retention. Junior people struggle in terms of understanding how to apply controls, as an example. How do I select the right control? How do I even understand how to interpret this control, right? So if I'm able to leverage ChatGPT or any of the large language models to do that, I can decompose laws, I can decompose contracts, I can do all of these things, right? And allow a junior person to be able to get fit for purpose a lot faster.
Hutch, what are your thoughts?
Very quickly, I think given the way I think we're going to visualize cyber terrain in the future, it's going to follow the geographic path of Google Earth, if you will, Google Earth for cyber. And what I mean is that the base image layer will be the traditional IT network topology map. On top of that would be cybersecurity focused overlays, for example, where is your key cyber terrain, your key, the crown jewels of your network. Then you would have critical attack paths, risk heat maps, zoom in, zoom out, and obviously all that can be better enhanced visualizing that type of environment using VR or AR devices.
Great, thank you. So moving on to the last question. Women represent about 25% of cybersecurity professionals. What can we do to get more women into the field? Jamie, can you give us your perspectives?
Yeah, my perspective again is once again it's at the kind of the bottom of the funnel. So I get paid often to facilitate game of musical chairs. I can't create female executives that don't exist already, but I think one way I look at it is there are some very talented women CISOs out there, and I think they're doing everything they can to set a great example. So first and foremost, I think people want to see a vision for, hey, what is possible? But along the way, I think it's incumbent upon everyone in the ecosystem to encourage women to get into this profession in the first place, to seek out ways to mentor them, give them development opportunities, and provide that. Because otherwise, it's just not going to happen on its own in a vacuum. So from an executive perspective, I think those are the types of things. And it's happening, but it feels like it just needs to be even more aggressively done. And one of the things I love about this ecosystem of security professionals, there's a sense we're all in it together. It's like everyone has an incentive to develop really good talent, and I think those are a few things that could be done more at the executive level.
Okay, thank you. Hutch, you had some really good observations in this area, so I was hoping you could share them.
Sure. The top 3 jobs in the federal government are held by women. Kemba Walden is at the helm of the Office of National Cyber Director, or better known as the Cyber Czar. Jen Easterly leads the nation's Cyber Defense Agency, also known as the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, under DHS. And Ann Neuberger sits on the National Security Council as the Assistant National Security, or Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technology. We still have a lot of work to do, but there's at least some positive news at the federal level.
Great, thanks. And so Jenai, as the woman here, can you give us your perspectives?
I will. Culture starts at the top of the organization, always has, always will. And so in order to ultimately solve the issue, you need to add diversity into the boards. So once we look at board of directors and we better diversify the board of directors, there is a pathway, right, that we can start building for women in middle management to be able to move into executive leadership. And it's difficult. So it can be anything from baby boards, so looking at startups and getting onto a board of directors, and what does that do? That enables us to understand the concerns that a board has and the way that they're going to position that to a cybersecurity professional. So you start to already get exposure to those type of communications. So that's one. The next is look, in order to be a CISO, you have to have operational experience, which means that you've got to have budget experience. You have to have managed a budget, not contributed to it, not have oversight to it. You have to have managed and owned that budget, managed and like the hire-fire relationship with your people. You have to have all of that experience to be able to move into a CISO position. So getting those type of opportunities is going to be key as well. The next is branding, so we oftentimes kind of feel that just because we do a good job, that means that we're going to become a CISO, and that's not the case, right? Because it's also a political role. And, so understanding how you want to communicate your personal brand to the world is key. So when, say, for instance, I'm interviewing somebody, I don't go straight to your resume, I go straight to your LinkedIn profile. What's there? You telling me what you've worked on? Are you writing about anything? Are you sharing, your experiences? Are you talking about the people that you've mentored? What's your brand, and how are you communicating that brand to the world? So making sure that you dial it in, know who you are and what you're trying to target. If I want to be a chief security officer, does your LinkedIn profile look like somebody who is on a pathway to become a chief information security officer? So your brand is key. And then there's a final one, and that is, again, somebody helped all of us get to where we are. And so we as women that are already in the industry have to stop talking about it and just reach our hands back and start actually helping people. Not giving them guidance and advice, but actually hands-on experience, helping people get into this industry, helping to train them, helping to teach them. And all you ask in return is that they do the same. They take one person and they help one more person get into the industry. And if we keep doing that, we'll get more women into the industry.
Great, thank you. I'm going to add one more, since you brought up mentoring. I think mentoring is great. Having a sponsor is even better. What if you're just starting out? How do you get a mentor, right? You can't just walk up to somebody and be like, hey, can you mentor me? I guess you can.
I think you can, actually.
Yeah.
I give people credit for doing that. Don't be bashful about asking for help. If there's someone you really respect, go out and ask them. And I think 99 times out of 100, they'll be flattered and would be happy to help you. But once again, it's not going to happen by itself. So I would encourage people to be bold and seek out mentors and ask them if they'd be willing to do it. And I think you'd be pleasantly surprised how many people would be happy to do it. That's my view.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Very rarely, and when we say seek out, that doesn't mean getting on Meta or any of the other social media pages and putting out a post saying, I want to get into security, help me. That's not what we mean. You know, so seek, again, part of it is understanding what area of cybersecurity or GRC you want to go into. If you want to be an application security architect, then you need to go one path. If I want to go into forensics or malware reverse engineering, it's a completely different path. So I think as a junior going into the industry, the first thing that you need to understand is the industry and understand all of the roles in cybersecurity and understand what the day in the life of looks like for that. And then once you understand that, now you can start identifying the mentors with whom you can target. And a mentor is not your boss, right? And mentor is not in your chain of command. You need somebody that can give you, like for me, the tough message. Some of us are a little hard-headed, you know, so you need somebody that can get through that tough exterior and be able to give you the truism of what's going on.
Thank you all so much for offering your expertise and advice, and I know we're out of time, so thank you all for listening.